Welcome to the Latino Podcast, where we discuss the intersection of law and our Latino communities with legal, political, and community leaders and visionaries. Let's get started.
Hey, it's Sean Gomez. Welcome to another edition of the Latino, where we discuss the intersection of law and our Latino communities. This episode, as always, is brought to you by our sponsors, Gomez Trial Attorneys, one of our nation's largest Latino-founded consumer rights, personal injury, employment, and civil rights law firm. Today, we have a very special guest, but first I'm going to introduce our co-host, or my co-host for today. You've met her before. I interviewed her before, and she interviewed me. And that's Jessica Lujan, who is a trial attorney here at my firm, a leader for her people in the community and law. And she has a very special guest that she has invited to be with us and who has traveled from Jessica's home state and town of El Paso, Texas. So take it away, Jessica.
That's right. Thank you, John. Hi, everybody. I'm super excited to be here today with someone who's very special in my heart. I spoke about Judge Maria Salas-Mendoza in the introductory podcast, and I'm fortunate enough to have her here in the podcast room today. We'll be able to talk to her and introduce yourself, Judge, please. We're so happy to have you.
Okay, you're shocking me already. I thought you were going to introduce me. So my name is Maria Salas-Mendoza. I'm judge of the 120th District Court in El Paso County, Texas. I am going to finish my 18th year on the trial bench this year. And then in January, I'll be the Chief Justice of the 8th Court of Appeals.
I couldn't do it better than that. And I want the audience to get to know you as soon as possible. So welcome. We're so happy to have you.
Yes, thank you for being here with us. You know, Jessica talks about you as a mentor and as a hero of hers in the law. And so what we like to do, we like to kind of start out with our guests, kind of tell us a little bit about, you know, growing up and, you know, you ended up as a judge and now you're going to be, you know, the Chief Justice of the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. I think a lot of people are going to be looking at you with pride. So how did this all start?
Yeah, it's a complete accident. So born and raised in El Paso, my parents didn't graduate from high school, but for whatever reason, both of them, if I remember correctly, would talk about Harvard, and I kind of mentioned that all the time. And I did really well in school, and you know, there's a lot of stuff, and I keep saying that I'm going to write a book one day, so there's a lot of gory detail in there. But for me, being at school was really my safe place. That was where I felt I felt like I knew what was going to happen. I understood the rules, and I lived really well in that environment. So I just really thrived and did really well. And I was lucky enough to be supported because I was such a nerd, and all my teachers supported me. So when I was in high school, still having done really well, I applied to Harvard, and I got in as an early admit. And, you know, when you get into Harvard, you go, even though I didn't really know too much about it. I just had known the name from my parents and had applied, and I did go visit, and it was a quick visit, and so ended up at Harvard undergrad, and really spent 4 years not making good use of my time. I felt at any moment they were knock on the door and tell me, we made a mistake, you shouldn't have gotten in, and you got to go home. As a consequence, I don't think I really took advantage of what Harvard has to offer. I mean, I was quiet. I didn't seek out, you know, tutors, and I just really got by. But I credit Harvard with really helping me figure out what I really love, and what I really love is community service. And I was a student leader at Phillips Brooks House at Harvard, and we did all kinds of prisoner education, food salvage. I worked with kids. I did all kinds of public service. I also started doing, I don't know what we called it then, but we did some training for students that were majority students that had never worked in the inner city, had never worked with Black kids, Latino kids. And so we would kind of share our experiences with them and hopefully help our, fellow students kind of be better teachers and counselors with our kids. So did that. And that really is what I love. My passion is working in the community. But no one was going to hire me at the Red Cross, United Way. I'm like, that's where I want to be in life. So I went to law school because I figured it was not a bad education. And there's actually a story about why I decided to be a lawyer, but that's boring. If we get to it, I'll tell you. So it was just kind of there. And then, and so here's the other thing. Being an El Paso girl, I thought I loved winters. And I thought, I love winters. I'm going to Massachusetts. And I realized that we have no clue what winters are in El Paso, Texas. So for law school, I went to UCLA, which is the other side of the country, for sun. But also they were still offering me scholarship to go to UCLA. So that's how I ended up at UCLA. And I never really thought I would practice law. That was not why I went to law school. I was really looking for that other job. And honestly, I had a fantastic job in California. I worked for a place called the Harriet Buhai Center for Family Law. And I was teaching our volunteers. I wasn't going to court. We were helping people who represent themselves. I was doing the clinics myself in East LA in Spanish. Wow. Loved that. Loved being in the community. It really was a perfect job. But when I started law school, my oldest was 4 months old. And when I started working, he was 4, going on 5, and I just felt really disconnected with the schools. And so I went back to El Paso, and I just took the first job that I could find, and that was with Legal Aid. And the director at Legal Aid at that time believed in putting us in the courtroom. We would just go to court, and then the rest is sort of history.
Amazing.
Yeah. But now, never in the plan. Never in the plan.
The guest just prior to you is a UCLA graduate. I don't know, like, if maybe you know her. Her name is Lorena Gonzalez. She currently is the president of the California Labor Federation. So she's basically a labor leader. She reminds me of you because she's very committed to kind of community help and service.
Great.
But shot in the dark, you know? Yeah.
She's probably a lot younger than me. I'm like a lot older.
No, you guys both look to
It's been a long time.
I would say, mid-20s, early 30s.
Yep. Exactly.
And so tell us this, Judge. Often we hear from people that we talk to in the community that, especially when it comes to justice, if they look up on the bench and see someone that kind of looks like them, reminds them of them, it gives them comfort. In terms of sitting on the bench in El Paso, Texas, how important do you believe it is to have, a Latina in that power seat for others in the community to look up to and appear before?
I think it's one of the most important things, right? I think there's a whole sense that the system isn't fair. And I do think that, we have this conversation with my bailiffs all the time because they're law enforcement. If you talk to law enforcement, it doesn't matter where they come from or where they are. And both my bailiffs are Latinos born and raised in sort of poor communities in El Paso, and they just say that, no, everything's fair. They arrest people, commit crimes. And I said, Robbie, you go to certain places, and, I've run the numbers in El Paso. It's a heavily Hispanic community, but our population of Black defendants is grossly overrepresented given their population in the community. Obviously, we have a lot of Latinos. And I say to them that just doesn't happen. So there's this it starts from the beginning, from investigation, prosecution, and the judges. So I think it's really critical. I call it procedural justice, just believing that the system is fair. It's so important, not just in criminal cases, but in civil cases too. And I do think that's why it's important that we have mediators who speak Spanish, who can really communicate with individuals about the process. So for me, I think it's one of the most important things as a judge. We all have those days where we think, did I do the right thing? Or am I making a difference? And I just really remind myself that it is important to be there, for me to be there. And that's partly why I reached out to Jessica and why she's so close to my heart, because I really believe it's important to bring people along, to encourage people to be lawyers and to stay in the field, because it's not just important that the judge be someone that the people who come to the court identify with, but we also need lawyers that they identify with, that they trust, right? Who are going to handle some of these most important things in their lives. So I believe in it 100%. I think it's important. I think it's important to the larger community that we continue to make sure that we keep judges on the bench that represent the community, that look like them, who understand just walking in the door where they're from, who their parents are, and how they were raised. It's critical for me. It's one of the most important things about my service on the bench.
Amazing. And so you talked about reaching out to Jessica. Maybe you guys can collectively tell that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
well, it was probably Jessica reached out first. Probably came to the court, but as soon as she came and said, "I want to be an intern," I'm losing your headsets. I was like, "This woman is fantastic. She's going to be a leader. She's, just super smart." And I really feel privileged that she came to the court and wanted to intern for the court. And, I would give her a project. She'd turn it around right away. And it was just like, okay, got to look for something else for Jessica to do. Her writing's amazing. And so I just knew that she was going to be a leader. And I've watched her from afar and see that she's doing really well. I'm proud of her. But I think, in some sense, it is sort of what I do. And I think it's important to do it. But I've always been, I feel like that's something that I get back, because I've had amazing people just kind of walk through the door, and I get the privilege of saying, yeah, I was there. I saw her when she was just a student. That's how I remember it.
Yeah, from my perspective, it was a little bit different just because I was so starstruck. So I was going to school. I had a little bit of a similar story. I went to school in the Midwest where it was very cold. I told myself, never again do I want to be in the cold. So I came to law school in San Diego. But, I have very close ties to my family, very close ties to El Paso. I always thought maybe I'll end up back in El Paso. And when I was looking at what am I going to do after my first year of law school, not having any ties to San Diego, I thought, okay, well, everybody's getting clerkships. Let me look online. And your profile came up, and I just spam emailed you. I guess you could say, let me take a shot in the dark and see if this very important judge, who just based on all your involvement, I saw that you were involved with students, Project Future. It's not Project Lead, but it's Project Future, the RSAP program with the women, all of that I found on the internet, which is a great resource. And I emailed you, and you got back to me right away. And I just remember the friendly tone of your email, your response. It was absolutely, I'd be more than happy. So I show up to El Paso in the summer, and you treated me as if we had known each other forever. And I was just so humbled. And to me, it was, the very first example of someone who I just had in such a high regard, who treated me, with respect and dignity and just such an excitement, right? Like you said, to have me in your room.
I was excited.
You were excited, and your entire staff knew who I was. Everybody was ready to have me. So, of course, just being welcomed in that way motivated me and made me just want to do such a good job. And, thinking about this is kind of a perfect segue, thinking about this podcast and being able to talk to you, I wanted to go back to, a quote from one of my favorite books, and I'll read it so we can just talk about it. It says, "Connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship." And to me, when I read this quote a very long time, I think I read this book maybe 2 years ago, it just always stuck with me. And I think the relationship and, the mentorship that I found in you is just really embodied in that. And I know that you personify that. I know that you value those relationships. So tell us a little bit about that, the connection, the importance of connection between people.
I do. I really, I talk about mentorship a lot because I think it's important. I don't know if it's because I don't have sisters but there's all these people that quote about an alpha female only has a small group of friends. I will tell you, I have a ton of friends that I consider I can call anytime and say, personal, professionally, something's going on, because I've always wanted to have those relationships and build those relationships. And I tell my colleagues who will say, like, everybody knows you. They say, oh, and Judge Salas-Mendoza helped me here, and it's really not all that. It's just being able to be willing to take the phone call and to help in any way that I can. And I've really done that as much as I could. But as I tell my colleagues, I was going to say, it's intentional, right? You have to make it an important part of what you do. And so I really think it's important to answer those emails and to answer the texts and to build relationships. But I've always found, as I said before, that it's mutual. It's a connection that really feeds both people out of respect and admiration, truly. But it's individual, right? It's not, you're not an extension of me. You're an amazing individual person, and that is what mentorship means to me. It's being able to support someone in their space, however they want to grow. And I've always, people come to me that want to run for office, and I always tell them, this is the bottom line advice. Everyone's going to give you advice. You have to decide what works for you, but you always have to decide every day, look yourself in the mirror and say, am I proud of this campaign? Does it reflect who I am as a person? And win or lose, if you can do that, it's a win. And I think that I've always told people you should live that way, right? And try to do that. But anyway, so I really think mentorship is important. I did want to mention about Project Features, a program we started in El Paso County. It was really to provide internships for aged-out foster kids. And it was really, these kids basically aged out of the system, don't have a family. And they do have their family, but they were never able to return to them and rely on them. And it was to give them an office job. So, they're able to find work, but it was retail. And so this was an opportunity for them to work in office spaces. So they work with the clerk's office, they work with the judges, and I still keep in touch with some of my Project Feature kids. And we, with the Women's Bar and my Lions Club, able to give them professional clothing. It really was an amazing program. But, those programs are hard to sustain. So year after year, we finally got the county was paying them. We got some, they were paid to do it. So it was a really fun project. And then the other one that you mentioned was the RSAT program. And so it's one of the things I'm going to miss. And I did talk to my team and my judge that works the program with me about continuing to do it after I go to the Court of Appeals. I have a treatment, we do a treatment court program for women who have completed a residential treatment. And so they go into a treatment court, and it provides greater accountability. It's knowing your judge in a way that's not just about sanctions and consequences, but supportive. And so it's a model that, tons of people are doing treatment courts now, and they're veteran treatment courts and DWI treatment courts. But this one is specifically for women. It's a population that is unique, and honestly, as we review our stats, not the highly successful court that we'd like it to be, but for us, and I tell people all the time, we went through 3 months of sobriety, and she was there for her children, and so every day is a success when we keep people from using. And also, we've had some amazing success. We have people that went on to college and come back and talk to our participants, and the amazing stories keep you doing that work. And so I couldn't really figure out a way that I could continue to do the work, not being a trial judge. But I'm going to miss that work with the women.
Yeah, Judge, it sounds like you really, love people. You talk about the relationships you have, and when you talk about your time on the bench, the importance of having someone that looks like them, maybe came from the same neighborhood as them, speaks their language, and you're doing this great work with these programs. Like, how do you think that translates to being an appellate court justice? Like, how are you going to bring that passion for people and that kind of cultural understanding to that job?
I don't know yet because I'm not there, but I do know, I've sat with the Court of Appeals almost really throughout my time on the trial bench. I've been appointed as an visiting associate justice, and so I've sat on a number of cases, and so I'll tell you a couple of things that come to mind. One is that what appellate justices do is work on consensus, right? They have to get folks who agree with their opinion, and there's a lot of intellectual wrangling that's involved there. So I think that my passion for building community hopefully will help me there. But I also think that one of the things that I believe in firmly is not just the judge that matters, but really my team that matters. And I've always had a commitment from my staff about this is how we treat people. This is what we do. When people call, even if it's not our job, I want you to help them find who can answer their question, assist them. And so that, I think, just bringing that to the Court of Appeals will be helpful in how the work is done. It's a very isolated job. Very few people go up there. But it is in our courthouse. And so to the extent that, I will make sure that we continue that mission, which is it's our job as the public servants to help the public and to make sure that we are answering questions that we can answer. And so I think that's just almost intrinsic, right? That's the kind of person I am. That's the kind of team I build. And I'm hoping that that's it's an important part that is needed. And so I'm on a mission that we are going to transform this court in a way that it functions well, that people are happy to come to work. And because I spend a lot of time there. And so I want to be happy when I go to the office. And so I think that's the part that will translate.
Amazing. Yeah, I think the court's going to be, very happy to have you as its leader and kind of, cultural tone, right? Yeah, very exciting. Now, did Jessica tell you about the mural here in the podcast room? Who did that?
Yes, I do know, and I know Jessica's parents too.
No way.
Yes, and when I came in, I'm like, oh my God, it looks so much better in person. Because I have a picture of it.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I have a picture of it, and I'd seen it, and I would zoom in stuff. It's amazing. And of course, Jessica's amazing parents.
They're great. I mean, what can I say? I was telling her this morning that they actually moved out here to help me with my kiddo. So that's something that, Judge Salas and I oftentimes would talk about is just our role as mothers. We both started our legal profession, as moms with little babies, just trying to make it. So she knows how important my parents are, and she's met them. They were so proud of me going into the courthouse, I remember. And so they're here with me now, and I was just telling her about that this morning.
They're great. I would say that I think, and so here's my timeline. My oldest was 4 months old when I started law school, and I was pregnant with my daughter when I graduated from law school. And my oldest is now actually practicing in Houston. But even though his dad and I are divorced, we went to his graduation together. And so he did this post where he posts our picture from my law school graduation, and then his dad and I with him at his law school graduation. And but I'll tell you about Michael. He the other day he said that this is not true, but this is a story I absolutely remember because it broke my heart. He called me when he was about a junior in college and said, Mom, I was so excited because his English professor said, Michael, I think really you should think about taking the LSAT. You're a very good speaker. You're a good writer. And he gave me all these details. So he went on. And I said, Mijo, I'm a lawyer, right? He said, I know, Mom. The other day I said it to him and I repeated the story. And he says, no, of course I wanted to follow in your footsteps. I don't know about that. My daughter has her bachelor's from St. John's in toxicology. She's finding her way. And then the baby is 21, just graduated from high school. Not just graduated. He's like 3 years out now. He doesn't want to go to college. He doesn't know what he wants to do. But his entire life, almost his entire life, I've been on the bench. He was a baby when I ran for office the first time. So he had his frame of reference is so different from his older brother and sister who were there when I was still trying to figure out just what I was going to do.
I think, didn't you have your daughter in law school?
I did my second week of my first year of law school.
Yeah, like, I hear those stories, and it makes me think about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who like was the mom and then taking care of her husband and still like just smashing law school. It just really, it's hard as a male, I think, to imagine. Like, to me, law school was like the most stressful, demanding time of my life. And also to be giving birth, to be pregnant, to be a mom. And I don't know, I just feel like as a male, I don't know if males would be up to that task.
My answer would probably be no, but I will say this. I think it gives us sort of a different priority, right? Because I am, and by the way, let me be clear, I did not smash law school. I mean, it was the first time where
I think to get through law school is to smash it.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I'm going to change my story about it because I did get through it. And I actually was licensed in California first. Wow. And I was not going to take that bar exam if we're not going to stay. So that was like, are we going to stay? Because I'm not going to do this unless we're going to stay. And so coming back to Texas was not planned. It really had to do with the kids, right? But so I don't feel like I smashed it. But I also didn't feel like I had to because I had my son, because I had, we were working different shifts or I was at school and Dad would work nights so that I could go home so we could spend as much of our time with my son. And there was just a different priority. My priority wasn't being at the top of my class or getting that law firm job. My priority was to get out because I needed a job. And in some ways, I don't think I had the stress that other people did because, right, even if you go in with a public interest mind, you sometimes get caught up in it and all of a sudden you think like you have to be on that competitive edge. Well, I didn't have it because I had a different priority. And with my daughter, I was pregnant during the bar exam, and I just wanted to have a just regular delivery. My son was a C-section, and so I was committed to it. So I went about 2 weeks before the bar exam, and the doctor says, and I was big as a house, and he says, oh no, we've got to schedule delivery and I said, no, I'm taking the bar exam in 2 weeks, or I don't remember now what it was. Anyways, my daughter was born August 7th, about 10 days after the bar exam. Wow. But I think it helped me. I mean, I felt good. I had two body hormones. I felt...
You had two brains.
I had two brains. I tell her she helped me. I really felt good about it. So in a way, you think there's all these challenges, but from my perspective, it's really what fueled me, and in some ways it really boosted me. So I have not ever seen it as a challenge. We do become masters of multitasking, and it's just how we function. But it has its downside, which is burnout, right? We have to take that time for ourselves and kind of figure out how to not just keep burning the candle at both ends. But for me, I think those things that other people think are like, how did you do it? I'm like, I don't know how I would have done it without it, right? Because that's just what got me through.
It's all about perspective and, just thinking about amazing lawyers, female lawyers and judges. Tell us about why you're in San Diego this weekend.
So I'm here for the National Association of Women Judges annual meeting. I'm a former district director of District 11, which is Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma. Now my very good friend, Justice Gina Benavides, is the district director. She's rolling off, and Justice Julie Countess I think she's on the 14th Court of Appeals in Texas, is going to become a district director. But again, it's been an important part for me to be involved with women across the nation, and it's networking, but it's also part of that mutual mentoring, right? We're there for each other. We all have different experiences, and it's part of what I think has made me kind of a better judge, to know what other people's experiences are. I'm excited.
And so I imagine that must be a rapidly growing group. I see like the appointments here at least, and I feel like it's come to the place where it's mainly females being appointed to the bench. Like, what, if what's the trend nationally or in Texas? Or
So I don't know the numbers, but I will tell you this. I do think that there's some improvements, but I do know for a fact that Latina lawyers in Texas are 4%.
Wow.
4% of all lawyers are Latinas. And so even though it appears that way, it's not necessarily true. And I will tell you that in El Paso, I'm very fortunate. It's like the community. It's not, there's largely Hispanic bench, men and women, a lot of women. But all we have to do is go to our annual training. We're reminded we are still the minority. The majority of judges in El Paso are white men who have been there a really long time. And then, so as the numbers start to grow, then all of a sudden the rules change. Right now there's different requirements and all kinds of things, which is fine because I've always said that the Latino and Latinx judge is more qualified because we've always had to be. That's just the way it is. We're used to it. And I think there's this perception that we're not. But I don't think we've ever had a problem with increased qualifications, but it's just kind of an interesting thing. In so many of my organizations, there are a lot of women. About 3 years ago, we formed the organization called Texas Latinx Judges. It's one of only 5 statewide organizations of Latino Hispanic judges. Ours is the first that we use Latinx, and that's controversial. But we chose it on purpose, and for us, it was really to designate that we embrace our non-binary brothers and sisters, but also that it's not just Mexican American, that it's Puerto Ricans, that it's all Latinx judges, and it's now largely women in leadership. And we'll have some judges tell us, we thought it was a women's organization. And I said, no, it's not a women's organization. But the people that have risen to leadership are women. And so she is amazing. And she did a great job. But she was one of the speakers at the annual meeting for the State Bar of Texas. Wow. And so she was amazing, and actually she was not the person who gave the stats, but she really talked about her experience. And I think I didn't really follow the committee. I saw snippets. I didn't really follow it. I thought it was a little bit too too Hollywood, whatever. I
followed it.
Even though I was at UCLA when we had the riots, it was shortly after, I think, O.J. Simpson, all of that stuff, right? So I know how things are, but she was a really good speaker and really talked about how what's really opened up for her is opportunities, and she's doing some litigation in Texas. But the speaker who actually gave the stats about 4% Latina lawyers is Judge Irma Carrillo Ramirez. She's the first Latina appointed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And so she was fantastic, and she provided the stats, and the state bar, like all public institutions in Texas, can't be controversial, can't, be looking at diversity. She just provided their own numbers. So the state bar's own numbers show this stat. And I left that meeting saying, I am not going to apologize anymore for women leadership because we're 4% of the population. And why is it our fault that we rise to the top and that we're the ones that are getting things done, who are organizing the programs? We try still to get our male colleagues involved, but we just haven't succeeded. I'm trying less because I think, why am I doing all the hard work? They don't do it for me. They don't try to do it for me.
That's an often repeated pattern, what you were describing.
So it appears that way. I do think there's improvement, but I don't think, it's that we've gotten to the place where women are the majority of judges or that we're getting the majority of appointments. I do think, and I'm a little biased, that women are better judges, and I do think that partly it's because of our sense of empathy and fairness. And
I've heard they're better police officers, too.
Well, yeah. I think there's just this sense of how would I want to be treated, right? Yeah. And I think for my courtroom, the bottom line is this, and I've always said to people, and you and I had this conversation before about which practice do I like more, and I really enjoy the criminal practice more just because it's busier. But I went to law school and went into, Harriet Buhey Center for Family Law was all family law, the legal aid, that's what I wanted to do, access to justice issues. But I purposely did not learn criminal law. I didn't want to know anything about criminal law because I thought like all my cousins and all my family are going to call me because they want representation. And I need to be able to say, look, I can't help you because I don't really know. So it was a very intentional, purposeful decision because that's my people. That's my people. I think it's important that everyone get treated fairly. I tell my prosecutors, we've had young prosecutors that come through the bench. I have to continue to tell them, trial is traumatic for everybody. Even the winner has to, the nerves of being on the witness stand, of going through trial for a week, it's traumatic. And on the criminal side, even when the decisions are hard, and I had a colleague in like all the groups that I'm in that had to render a life sentence, and I've had to do that a few times, and it wasn't my decision, it's the jury decision, but as the judge, even just reading it, it's hard, right? And I said to her, when you're ready to talk, we can talk. But I also said, when you stop caring is when you should stop being a judge. When it doesn't matter to you that that person isn't going home and that person's family, because no matter who they are, they have family who love them, will miss them, will not see them in the same way again. We shouldn't be judges if we don't care about that, right? And on the other side, obviously the family, there's no vindication, right? If you've suffered a harm, whether it's a death or a serious injury, having someone go to prison might help a little, but it doesn't bring back the loss, right? And I think too, on the plaintiff side, when you think about your work, everybody thinks it's so distilled and it's just, money, and it's traumatic. It's traumatic, and I always remember that, and I make the staff remember that, because that's why we need to treat people well. Because when they're coming to the court, there's already a lot of emotion and a lot of stress, and the last thing they need is a judge who's disrespectful or yelling them or not caring or aloof. And same for the staff. So they know when we're there, we're on. We have a job to do. And I think women do it better.
Well, I'm not going to dispute that. You're a judge, so I can't argue. I will say I looked up, it's Camille Vasquez. I want to make sure I said it right, because
I was thinking Camila, but I know it's your daughter, so I was like,
I'm going to invite her. I think she'd be a good guest. So I said your name right.
Camille
please
Vasquez.
Consider joining us.
And she is great. And I think also she's so young that I think that it's really good for young women to see someone who, and so what she talks about is the relationship she built with Johnny Depp. It wasn't just about this high profile thing. She'd done some other work for him. And that's why he wanted her on his team, because he knew her. He trusted her. You can't put money on that. The relationship you build with your clients, and they trust you to take care of the important things of their lives. It's
to be sure. And so we have a lot of, lawyers and law students, and that are going to be listening to this. And so you've seen a lot of lawyers come before you on the bench. What advice would you give those law students or younger lawyers about how to be their very best self in court, representing, someone that needs help?
Well, I'm sure it's all the advice that everyone has already heard, right? You have to be authentic. You have to be yourself. I do think you need to do your homework, which is be prepared, make sure your case, the law. I think it's always helpful to be respectful. I think it's changing a little bit now back, but there was a period of time there where I felt the lawyers were really just not very respectful. They got sort of aggressive, and maybe true. It just sort of depends where you are. El Paso has never been that bar. We've always had a very respectful bar, but even our bar got a little bit gnarly, and so that never helps. And I talk a lot to lawyers, and I always say I don't like it when lawyers fight with each other. Because sometimes I see those emails and I'm like, in what world is that appropriate? Sometimes I've had to stop hearings to tell lawyers, listen, you need to work this out. Come back when you're ready to argue the motion, but something's going on here that doesn't work for me. I tell lawyers all the time, I don't like lawyers who are collegial, who don't get along with each other. So I think that sometimes comes easily for some people, and other people have to work at it. If you tend to be an aggressive lawyer, I would say work on that, because collegiality goes a long way. cases come and go, but relationships with your fellow members of the bar, that's your reputation. So I would say that. And I would say, especially for our community, I am that person who never really believed in themselves. And I still kind of say that. I'm talking to someone right now who's getting ready to run for office. And the question was, why do you do all these things? And I said, because I'm always worried that I'm not doing enough. Am I reaching the right people? Am I giving the right message? To this day, that imposter syndrome feeds so much of what I do. It's not healthy, but it's why we also stay on top of the ball, right? And we get things done. But I would say you are enough. You are enough. You are smart enough. You can do this. And it is so important that you stick with it because there are a lot of people who are going to look to you to help them. And they need you to be in the profession doing a good job.
Amazing. Great advice. Closing remarks, Ms. Lujan?
I'm still on cloud nine, so I'm very happy that, this all came together, that we were able to make it happen. Thank you so much for taking the time, Judge Salas. It's an honor, and I got to introduce you to my boss, John.
I have one more thing to add.
Please do.
Listen, because I've been like heavy women, and I actually, I do believe that. But you're a testament to not all our mentors are women. And Jessica and I have an important mentor who we lost recently, and that's Clinton Cross. Clinton Cross founded Texas Legal Services Corporation. He knew every case he ever studied. He was 83. And I'd sit down to lunch with him, and he would cite cases, and I think I have to keep writing this down. He was an amazing lawyer, dedicated to the law, and really access to justice issues. And he was the whitest guy ever. So I think it's important that we support each other. I do believe that women are strong and that we need to support each other. But I've had some very important male mentors along the way, and I know that you have too. And I believe that we have to look everywhere for those people that inspire us, to lead us, to guide us, and that it shouldn't all look one way. That sometimes the leaders that are really going to guide us don't look like us at all.
I agree. And thank you for bringing up Clinton.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Your Honor. Thank you for being here with us, taking time out of your busy schedule. I hope you enjoy your time in San Diego with the other judges. Thank you for your empathetic, compassionate leadership at the court. We need more judges like you and, hopefully, more lawyers that share those values. So I think it's an important message that you gave today. And so this will wrap up this episode of the Latino podcast. We encourage our listeners to tune in and to subscribe. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, and all the other channels. So until next time, signing off, John Gomez with the Latino podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Latino podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.